The greatest mistake an alpha can make is believing strength is something the eye can measure. Beneath the brightest full moon in a generation, the Grand Moon Plaza shimmered beneath thousands of silver lanterns while every noble family, every village elder, and every royal guardian gathered for the ceremony of destiny. White marble pillars reflected the moonlight across polished stone, and the air carried the soft fragrance of blooming moon lilies arranged around the sacred circle where fate itself would soon be witnessed. At the center of the gathering stood Omega Evelyn Parker, 24 years old, dressed in a simple ivory ceremonial gown that seemed almost too modest among the elaborate royal attire surrounding her. Long blonde hair rested gently across her shoulders, and her clear blue eyes reflected equal parts hope and quiet uncertainty. Around her neck hung an old silver pendant that had belonged to her late mother. She had worn it every day of her life, never knowing why it always felt warm beneath the full moon. Across the sacred circle stood Alpha Orion Brooks, 29 years old, admired throughout the kingdom for his courage, intelligence, and unwavering leadership. His tailored black ceremonial coat, embroidered with silver wolf crests, marked him as the future every noble family trusted. As the moon reached its highest point, Elder Nathaniel slowly raised the ancient moon staff toward the sky. A deep silence settled over the enormous plaza. Alpha Orion Brooks, the elder announced, his voice carrying across every balcony and courtyard. The moon has revealed your destined companion. Will you accept the bond placed before you? Hundreds of hopeful eyes shifted toward Orion. For a brief moment, he looked directly at Evelyn. She offered the smallest hopeful smile, believing every story she had heard since childhood about destiny overcoming every difference. Orion remained silent long enough for anticipation to fill the entire plaza. Then his expression hardened. He slowly shook his head. A kingdom cannot place its future upon weakness, he declared calmly. I honor the moon, but I must place my people first. I cannot accept an Omega who lacks the strength to stand beside an Alpha King. Gasps swept through the gathered crowd. Some nobles quietly nodded in agreement, while others lowered their eyes in visible discomfort. Evelyn felt every word settle upon her heart like cold winter snow. She searched Orion's face for hesitation, but found only determination. Rather than pleading or defending herself, she lowered her head respectfully. I understand, Your Majesty, she whispered softly. Her voice never trembled. She offered one graceful bow before turning away from the sacred circle. The music had already faded. The celebration no longer felt like a celebration at all. As Evelyn walked through the enormous palace gates alone, no one noticed the silver pendant resting against her chest begin glowing beneath her traveling cloak. The light remained faint, hidden from nearly every eye. Nearly, at the far edge of the crowd, an elderly woman wrapped in weathered blue robes suddenly froze. Her pale gray eyes widened as the pendant released a quiet pulse of silver light unlike anything she had witnessed in decades. Without speaking, she carefully followed Evelyn from a distance through the empty palace gardens. Beyond the capital walls, the young Omega stepped onto a lonely forest path beneath the full moon, believing she had simply been rejected because she was ordinary. She never realized that every ancient stone marker lining the old woodland trail had begun glowing softly the moment she passed, nor did she notice the gentle woodland animals quietly emerging from the shadows to watch her continue into the ancient forest. Behind her, the elderly woman stopped before the first glowing stone, placed a trembling hand upon its weathered surface, and whispered words almost forgotten by history. The last Moonborn princess has finally returned. The ancient forest welcomed Evelyn with a silence unlike anything she had ever known. Moonlight slipped gently through towering pine branches, covering the winding path in soft silver, while a cool breeze carried the scent of cedar and wildflowers. She walked without any destination in mind, holding her traveling cloak close against the evening air. The pain of the ceremony still lingered within her heart, yet she refused to let bitterness follow her into the quiet wilderness. Every step carried her farther from the kingdom that had judged her before ever knowing her. The silver pendant resting against her chest remained pleasantly warm, though she believed it was only because it had absorbed the heat of her body during the long walk. She had worn the pendant since childhood, a final gift from the mother she barely remembered, and never once questioned why it seemed strangely alive whenever the full moon filled the sky. As the forest grew deeper, small woodland creatures quietly emerged from beneath bushes and behind ancient trees. A white rabbit paused only a few feet away before calmly continuing across the path. Bright songbirds landed upon low branches instead of flying away. Even a graceful white deer stepped into the moonlight, watching Evelyn with peaceful curiosity before disappearing silently among the towering pines. She smiled gently at the unexpected companions, unaware that the forest itself had begun recognizing someone it had waited generations to see again. Far behind her, the elderly woman in weathered blue robes continued following at a respectful distance. She never called out or hurried forward. Instead, she carefully observed every glowing stone marker lining the forgotten trail. One after another, ancient symbols carved into weathered granite awakened with pale silver light as Evelyn passed beside them. The old woman's breathing became uneven with quiet disbelief. She placed trembling fingers upon one glowing carving before whispering, "The path remembers her." Hours passed before Evelyn reached a peaceful clearing surrounded by towering oak trees. At its center rested a crystal spring so perfectly still that it reflected the full moon like polished glass. She knelt beside the water to wash the dust from her hands. The instant her fingertips touched the surface, gentle rings of silver light spread across the spring without disturbing its calm reflection. White water lilies resting along the shoreline slowly opened their petals despite the late hour. Evelyn drew her hand back in surprise, believing she had imagined the strange light. Before she could stand, soft footsteps approached from behind. The elderly woman finally entered the clearing with calm, measured steps. Her weathered face carried kindness rather than suspicion, and the glowing blue pendant around her neck shimmered in harmony with Evelyn's silver necklace. Neither woman spoke immediately. The peaceful silence felt strangely familiar, as though the forest itself wished to listen first. The elder offered a gentle smile. "My name is Sister Helena," she said quietly. "I have been searching for someone for many years." Evelyn rose politely and lowered her head with respect. "I am afraid you have mistaken me for someone else." Sister Helena slowly shook her head while looking directly at the glowing pendant resting against Evelyn's chest. "No," she answered with quiet certainty. "I believe history has finally remembered your name." Before Evelyn could ask another question, a soft silver glow appeared beneath the crystal spring. Ancient markings hidden beneath the clear water slowly emerged, forming the shape of a royal crescent surrounded by stars. The light reflected across Evelyn's face, while Sister Helena watched with grateful tears gathering in her eyes. She whispered almost to herself, "The forgotten temple has opened its first door." The silver light beneath the crystal spring continued shimmering long after the ancient symbol appeared, yet the peaceful water remained perfectly still. Evelyn stared at the glowing crescent surrounded by delicate stars beneath the surface, struggling to understand what her eyes were seeing. She had lived her entire life believing she was an ordinary Omega with nothing remarkable except a pendant inherited from her mother. Now the forest itself seemed determined to tell a different story. Sister Helena stepped closer to the edge of the spring and slowly knelt beside the water. She gently traced the outline of the glowing symbol without disturbing its reflection. "This mark has not awakened for more than 200 years, she whispered. "It only appears for one bloodline." Evelyn instinctively touched the silver pendant resting against her chest. The metal had become warmer than ever before, pulsing softly like a quiet heartbeat beneath her fingertips. "I do not understand," she admitted. "My mother never spoke about any royal family. We lived simply. She taught me to help people, to be kind, and to expect nothing in return." Sister Helena smiled with quiet sadness. "Sometimes the greatest treasures survive because they are hidden, not because they are celebrated." As those words settled into the cool night air, the silver glow beneath the spring slowly stretched toward the opposite shore, revealing a narrow pathway of smooth white stones that had been concealed beneath the water only moments earlier. The path led directly toward a towering wall of ivy covering the side of an ancient cliff. Evelyn watched in silent amazement as the vines gently parted on their own, revealing enormous stone doors carved with moons, stars, and graceful wolves surrounding a single royal crest identical to the symbol glowing beneath the water. Neither woman touched the doors. Before they could take another step, the ancient entrance responded to the pendant around Evelyn's neck. A soft silver beam reached from the necklace toward the carved crest, and with a deep, echoing sound, the stone doors slowly opened inward. Cool air carrying the fragrance of old cedar, polished stone, and moon lilies drifted from the hidden sanctuary beyond. Hundreds of crystal lanterns lining the passage awakened one by one without flame, filling the corridor with gentle silver light. Evelyn hesitated at the threshold, overwhelmed by the feeling that she had somehow returned to a place she had never visited. Sister Helena lowered her head respectfully before entering behind her. The long passage eventually opened into a magnificent circular chamber supported by towering marble columns carved with scenes of ancient kings, queens, guardians, and peaceful gatherings beneath full moons. At the center of the chamber rested an elevated crystal pedestal surrounded by elderly men and women dressed in elegant white and silver robes. None appeared surprised by Evelyn's arrival. Instead, every guardian slowly stood and respectfully bowed. The eldest among them carried an ancient staff crowned with a crystal moon. His warm gray eyes rested gently upon Evelyn before he spoke. For many generations we protected this sanctuary while waiting for the child who carried the final Moonborn bloodline. Evelyn looked around the silent chamber, searching for any sign that this might still be a misunderstanding. "There must be some mistake," she said softly. "I am only Evelyn." The elder smiled kindly before raising his crystal staff toward the glowing pendant around her neck. The silver necklace lifted gently from her chest without breaking its chain, and a brilliant crescent surrounded by 12 stars appeared above the crystal pedestal. Every guardian quietly lowered to one knee. Sister Helena closed her eyes with grateful relief. The elder's calm voice echoed through the ancient chamber. "Welcome home, Your Highness. The last Moonborn princess has finally returned." The magnificent chamber remained silent as the glowing crescent and 12 silver stars floated peacefully above the crystal pedestal. Evelyn stood motionless, unable to accept what every guardian already believed beyond doubt. She looked from one respectful face to another, searching for disbelief that matched her own, yet she found only quiet relief and gentle smiles. The elderly guardian slowly lowered his crystal staff before stepping toward her with calm, measured movements. "My name is High Keeper Alden," he said softly. "For many generations we have guarded the Moonborn sanctuary, believing that one day the final heir would return." Evelyn gently shook her head. "I cannot be a princess. My mother raised me in a small cottage beyond the western hills. We owned very little." She never spoke of palaces or kingdoms. High Keeper Alden nodded with understanding. "Because your mother chose your safety above every royal title." Sister Helena carefully removed an ancient leather-bound journal from a marble table resting beside the pedestal. Its weathered cover carried the same crescent surrounded by 12 stars. She opened the final pages and revealed a carefully preserved portrait protected beneath crystal. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The young woman painted there looked almost identical to her mother, wearing elegant white robes embroidered with silver moons, while holding the very same pendant that now rested around Evelyn's neck. Tears quietly filled Evelyn's blue eyes. "She truly belonged here," she whispered. "She belonged everywhere the Moonborn protected," Sister Helena replied gently. High Keeper Alden slowly guided Evelyn toward a circular map carved into the polished marble floor. Tiny silver lights marked every kingdom across the continent. At the center rested a brilliant crystal representing the Moonborn crown, surrounded by graceful lines connecting every realm together. "Long before Alpha Kings ruled separately," Alden explained, "the Moonborn princess united every kingdom by preserving trust instead of demanding obedience. The crown was never a symbol of control. It was a promise that no kingdom would place pride above peace." Evelyn listened carefully while the crystal lights shimmered beneath her feet. For the first time, fragments of forgotten childhood memories quietly surfaced. She remembered her mother singing beneath the full moon, tracing the shape of a crescent upon her forehead before bedtime, and telling her, "Kindness is the strongest inheritance anyone can receive." At the time, those words had sounded like nothing more than a loving bedtime story. Now they carried an entirely different meaning. During the weeks that followed, Evelyn remained inside the hidden sanctuary. She studied ancient histories, learned the forgotten traditions of the Moonborn, and spent each sunrise beside the crystal gardens where the guardians taught her how harmony always began with compassion instead of authority. She discovered that her gift did not command nature. It awakened life wherever hope had nearly disappeared. Flowers slowly opened when she cared for neglected gardens. Crystal springs flowed more brightly whenever she walked beside them. Even frightened woodland animals approached her without hesitation, sensing the quiet peace surrounding her heart. She accepted every lesson with humility, never asking for a throne or a title. Highkeeper Alden watched her progress with growing confidence. One evening, as the full moon illuminated the sanctuary through the great crystal dome above, the ancient moon crown resting upon a marble altar released a gentle pulse of silver light for the first time in generations. Every guardian looked toward the sacred relic in astonishment. Sister Helena quietly smiled through grateful tears. Highkeeper Alden gazed at the awakening crown before speaking almost in a whisper. The Moonborn bloodline has returned. Yet far beyond the hidden sanctuary, inside Orion's kingdom, the first signs of quiet decline had already begun spreading across the land. While no one yet understood that the future of every kingdom was moving steadily toward the young woman who still believed kindness mattered more than royalty. 3 years passed beneath changing seasons. Yet the hidden Moonborn sanctuary remained untouched by the uncertainty spreading across the outside world. Each morning began with the gentle ringing of crystal bells as Evelyn joined the guardians beside quiet gardens overflowing with silver lilies and flowering trees. She learned that a true Moonborn princess did not rule through commands or fear. She listened before speaking, healed before judging, and placed the well-being of others above every personal desire. Highkeeper Alden taught her the forgotten history of the Moonborn crown, while Sister Helena guided her through ancient rituals that strengthened the harmony between the land and those who cared for it. Evelyn never sought greatness, but wherever she walked, life quietly flourished. Crystal springs became clearer, neglected gardens filled with blossoms, and injured birds returned to the sky after resting safely within the sanctuary. The guardians smiled as they watched her kindness become the very quality that awakened the ancient gifts carried within her bloodline. One peaceful evening, while practicing inside the moon garden beneath a bright full moon, Evelyn gently placed both hands upon a fading white rose growing beside the stone pathway. She simply closed her eyes and whispered words of gratitude taught by the Moonborn elders. Moments later, fresh green leaves appeared along the fragile stem, followed by new blossoms opening one after another beneath the moonlight. The surrounding flowers quietly followed, transforming the entire garden into a sea of silver and white. Sister Helena watched from nearby with grateful tears shining in her eyes. "The land trusts her," she whispered softly. Highkeeper Alden nodded with quiet certainty, just as it trusted every moon born before her. Far beyond the sanctuary, however, Orion's kingdom no longer reflected the strength admired throughout the neighboring realms. The great harvest fields that once stretched like golden oceans across the valleys now produced smaller crops with each passing season. Merchants entering the capital carried fewer wagons than before, and village leaders arrived at the palace requesting help for orchards that no longer blossomed as they once had. Inside the royal council chamber, maps covered with reports lay across a polished oak table. Orion listened carefully while advisors debated possible causes. Some blamed changing weather. Others suspected trade difficulties or natural cycles. Every explanation sounded reasonable, yet none truly explained why the decline continued despite every effort. Orion dismissed the council only after sunset before quietly walking alone onto the palace balcony overlooking the city. Lanterns still glowed along the streets, and families continued their evening routines, yet something felt different. The laughter drifting upward from the marketplace seemed quieter than he remembered. The confidence that once surrounded the kingdom had slowly given way to uncertainty. As he rested both hands upon the marble railing, his thoughts unexpectedly returned to the young Omega, who had silently accepted his rejection beneath the full moon 3 years earlier. He remembered the calm dignity in Evelyn's eyes, the silver pendant around her neck, and the strange feeling that had lingered long after she disappeared beyond the palace gates. He had convinced himself that choosing strength over compassion had protected his kingdom. Now he found himself wondering why victory had begun to feel so empty. At that same moment, inside the Moonborn sanctuary, the ancient moon crown resting upon its marble altar released another gentle pulse of silver light. This time, the crystal map beneath it responded as well. Tiny lights representing every kingdom remained bright except for one. Orion's realm flickered weakly before gradually dimming further. The guardians gathered around the ancient map in complete silence. High Keeper Alden slowly placed his hand upon the fading light before looking toward Evelyn with quiet resolve. "The time is approaching," he said gently. "Soon the kingdoms will no longer search for a stronger ruler. They will search for the one person capable of restoring what strength alone could never protect." The invitation arrived beneath a silver seal that no kingdom had seen in generations. Royal messengers traveled across every realm carrying identical scrolls announcing the convocation of the moon, a gathering requested by the ancient Moonborn sanctuary itself. Rumors spread faster than the riders who carried them. Some believed forgotten kingdoms had returned. Others whispered that an old prophecy had finally awakened. Inside Orion's palace, the invitation rested upon the council table while every advisor examined the unfamiliar crescent surrounded by 12 stars impressed into the wax. Elder Nathaniel quietly recognized the symbol immediately, but chose his words with care. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "if the Moonborn Sanctuary has truly called the kingdoms together, this meeting may become the most important gathering of our lifetime." Orion studied the elegant handwriting across the parchment before nodding once. "Then we will attend." Several days later, royal processions from every neighboring kingdom arrived at the magnificent Hall of Accord, an ancient marble sanctuary built beside a crystal lake where rulers had once settled disputes through diplomacy instead of conquest. White banners drifted gently in the afternoon breeze, while crystal fountains reflected sunlight across polished stone courtyards. Every throne prepared for the visiting rulers faced a single elevated platform that remained covered by flowing silver curtains. Orion entered with measured confidence, yet he quickly noticed something unusual. Kings, queens, scholars, and ambassadors who normally greeted one another with quiet formality now carried expressions of genuine curiosity. Every conversation eventually returned to the same question: who had summoned them all? Soft bells echoed throughout the great hall. The silver curtains slowly parted. High Keeper Alden appeared first, followed by Sister Helena and the Moonborn guardians dressed in flowing white and silver robes. Every conversation immediately fell silent. Then one final figure stepped gracefully into the light. Evelyn walked calmly across the marble platform, wearing elegant Moonborn ceremonial robes embroidered with silver constellations that shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. The simple pendant she had always worn now rested beneath a graceful crescent diadem that reflected soft moonlight despite the bright sky above. Her posture remained humble, yet quiet confidence surrounded every step she took. Without a single command being spoken, every guardian lowered to one knee. Moments later, rulers from neighboring kingdoms respectfully stood in acknowledgement of the ancient Moonborn bloodline. Orion remained completely still. For an instant, the crowded hall disappeared from his awareness. He saw only the young Omega he had once believed too weak to stand beside him, now carrying herself with a calm dignity that no crown alone could create. His memory returned to the full moon 3 years earlier, to the quiet farewell she had offered after his rejection, and to the silver pendant he had never bothered to question. High Keeper Alden raised his crystal staff toward the assembled kingdoms. "Today," he announced, "we welcome the final Moonborn princess, guardian of the oldest covenant between the kingdoms and the land itself." A gentle murmur spread through the gathering as astonished nobles exchanged uncertain glances. Orion lowered his eyes briefly, realizing that the woman he had judged by appearance alone had carried a legacy greater than any royal bloodline in his own kingdom. Evelyn's gaze eventually met his across the grand hall. There was no anger within her blue eyes and no desire for revenge. There was only quiet compassion and the steady confidence of someone who had discovered her purpose. Orion felt the weight of his own decision more deeply than ever before, understanding that the greatest strength he had failed to recognize had never belonged to power at all. As the gathering settled into respectful silence, High Keeper Alden carefully placed an ancient crystal crown upon a velvet cushion before Evelyn. Its silver light illuminated the hall, but instead of lifting it, she looked thoughtfully toward the assembled rulers, unaware that the oldest secret surrounding the moon crown was about to change every kingdom forever. The ancient crystal crown remained untouched upon its velvet cushion while complete silence settled across the hall of accord. Sunlight streamed through towering glass windows, causing the silver gemstones embedded within the crown to shimmer with a quiet brilliance that seemed almost alive. Every ruler present waited for Evelyn to step forward and claim the symbol of her newly revealed heritage. Instead, she remained where she stood beside High Keeper Alden, her hands gently folded before her, her calm blue eyes focused not upon the crown but upon the people gathered inside the hall. Her quiet restraint surprised everyone. She showed no excitement for power and no desire for recognition. High Keeper Alden slowly lifted an ancient scroll sealed with silver wax. Its weathered parchment carried the same crescent surrounded by 12 stars that decorated the Moonborn sanctuary. Elder Nathaniel immediately recognized the document and lowered his head with deep respect. "This," Alden announced, "is the first covenant of the moon, written before the kingdoms became divided." Carefully breaking the ancient seal, he unfolded the fragile scroll and began reading words that had not echoed through a royal gathering for centuries. "The moon crown shall never belong to ambition. It shall awaken only in the presence of one who protects harmony before authority. No alpha, no throne, and no kingdom may endure without the blessing of the moon-born bloodline. For strength without compassion slowly consumes itself." A quiet murmur spread through the assembled rulers. Several kings exchanged thoughtful glances while royal scholars hurriedly copied every word. Orion remained motionless. Every sentence felt like another piece of a truth he should have understood years earlier. He looked toward the crystal crown, then toward Evelyn, finally realizing that the Moonborn princess had never existed to stand beneath an Alpha King. She had always stood beside every kingdom equally, preserving balance where pride threatened to divide them. High Keeper Alden continued reading. "When the Moonborn heir is rejected because kindness is mistaken for weakness, the land itself withdraws its blessing, not as punishment, but as a reminder that true leadership begins with humility." Orion quietly closed his eyes. Images from the ceremony 3 years earlier returned with painful clarity. Evelyn's hopeful smile, his own confident refusal, the respectful bow she offered before leaving without anger. He had believed he was protecting his people. Instead, he had judged the one person capable of protecting them all. Before anyone could speak, the crystal crown suddenly released a gentle pulse of silver light. The glow spread across the polished marble floor, forming graceful lines that connected every throne inside the hall before gathering beneath Evelyn's feet. The light did not move toward any alpha ruler. It chose only her. High Keeper Alden stepped back respectfully. "The moon crown has recognized its rightful guardian," he said softly. Evelyn looked down at the glowing pattern surrounding her. "If the crown truly belongs to harmony," she replied with quiet sincerity, "then it should never separate kingdoms. It should remind them that no throne becomes stronger when another kingdom grows weaker." Her words filled the hall with thoughtful silence. Several rulers slowly nodded in agreement. Even those who had arrived with suspicion now listened with genuine respect. Orion finally stepped forward from his place among the assembled kings. He stopped several feet away, careful not to cross into the circle of silver light surrounding Evelyn. His voice remained calm, though regret could no longer be hidden behind royal composure. 3 years ago," he said quietly, "I believed I understood what strength looked like. Today I understand that I never recognized it when it stood before me." Evelyn met his eyes with the same quiet kindness that had never left her heart. Before she could answer, the crystal crown dimmed slightly, and High Keeper Alden unfolded one final page hidden beneath the original covenant. His expression grew unexpectedly solemn as he whispered, "The blessing can only be fully restored after one final choice is freely made, and that choice now belongs to the Alpha who once chose pride over destiny." The final page of the First Covenant remained open in High Keeper Alden's hands while every ruler inside the Hall of Accord waited in complete silence. The gentle silver light surrounding Evelyn continued flowing across the polished marble floor, connecting every throne before returning to the crystal crown resting upon its velvet cushion. Outside the great windows, the crystal lake reflected the afternoon sky, yet distant hills beyond the gathering still carried the pale colors of a land slowly losing its harmony. High Keeper Alden carefully lifted his eyes from the ancient parchment before speaking. "The final blessing cannot be restored by the Moonborn princess alone," he said quietly. "The Alpha who once placed pride above compassion must freely surrender the power he feared to lose. Only then will the Covenant remember its promise." The words settled heavily across the hall. Every gaze slowly turned toward Orion. No advisor spoke. No neighboring ruler offered guidance. The choice belonged to him alone. Orion remained motionless for several moments before calmly removing the royal crest fastened across his ceremonial cloak. He looked down at the familiar symbol that had represented authority throughout his entire adult life. For years he had believed protecting that symbol meant protecting his kingdom. Now he finally understood that true leadership demanded the courage to release power when holding it no longer served the people. Without hesitation, he walked toward the center of the hall and gently placed the royal crest beside the crystal crown. "If my title stands between the people and the future they deserve," he said with quiet conviction, "then I willingly place the kingdom before myself." Complete silence filled the chamber. Elder Nathaniel slowly lowered his head in respect. One by one, the rulers gathered throughout the hall followed his example. No one honored Orion because he had remained a king. They honored him because, for the first time, he had chosen humility over pride. Evelyn stepped forward until she stood only a few feet away from him. She looked at the royal crest resting beside the untouched moon crown before lifting her eyes to meet his. "A title does not define the heart of the person who wears it," she said gently. "The choice you made today will protect more people than the choice you made 3 years ago." Orion offered a grateful smile touched with quiet regret. "Thank you for giving my people hope after I failed to recognize yours." Evelyn answered only with a small nod before turning toward the crystal crown. High Keeper Alden respectfully lifted the ancient relic with both hands. Instead of placing it upon Evelyn immediately, he held it above the silver circle surrounding her. The crown responded with a brilliant but gentle light that spread through every crystal window of the Hall of Accord before flowing across the surrounding mountains and valleys. Outside, the crystal lake shimmered with renewed clarity. White lilies blooming along the shoreline slowly opened together, although evening had not yet arrived. Messengers standing upon the distant terraces watched in amazement as fading trees regained fresh green leaves and quiet streams reflected silver light once again. Throughout the neighboring kingdoms, farmers noticed healthy fields gently swaying beneath a warm breeze, while forgotten gardens unexpectedly blossomed. Back inside the hall, the light gradually settled around Evelyn like a peaceful halo before returning to the crystal crown. High Keeper Alden smiled softly. "The moon has accepted the first promise," he whispered. Yet before the ceremony could continue, the crown released one final pulse toward the open covenant. New words slowly appeared across the once empty parchment. Sister Helena looked down at the glowing message before quietly drawing a careful breath. "The final blessing," she said gently, "will only become complete beneath the next full moon, when forgiveness is chosen as freely as sacrifice." The next full moon rose above the Hall of Accord exactly 30 days later, bathing every kingdom in gentle silver light as rulers, guardians, scholars, and ordinary families gathered once more beside the crystal lake. This time there were no whispers of uncertainty and no anxious debates about forgotten prophecies. Instead, quiet hope filled the evening air as white lilies covered the shoreline and thousands of lanterns reflected across the peaceful water. At the center of the ancient gathering place stood Evelyn wearing elegant moonborn robes woven with silver threads that shimmered beneath the moonlight. The crystal crown rested upon a white marble pedestal before her, while High Keeper Alden, Sister Helena, Elder Nathaniel, and the assembled guardians formed a respectful circle around the sacred altar. Orion approached without royal banners, ceremonial guards, or symbols of authority. He wore a simple, dark formal coat, choosing to stand before the gathering not as an alpha king seeking recognition, but as a man who had learned the true meaning of responsibility. Highkeeper Alden slowly opened the first covenant and raised his eyes toward the moon. The final blessing begins when forgiveness is offered freely and accepted without obligation, he said softly. Complete silence followed. Orion stepped forward until only a few feet separated him from Evelyn. He lowered his head with genuine humility. 3 years ago, I believed strength meant choosing power over compassion. I judged you without knowing your heart, and my decision affected far more lives than my own. I cannot change yesterday, but I will spend the rest of my life serving the people I once believed I could protect through pride alone. Evelyn looked quietly at the man standing before her. She remembered the lonely road beyond the palace, the hidden sanctuary, the kindness of the Moonborn guardians, and every lesson that had transformed sorrow into purpose. None of those moments had been wasted. They had guided her toward the person she had become. She gently stepped forward and extended her hand. I forgive you, she said with calm sincerity. Not because the past disappeared, but because every kingdom deserves a future that is no longer shaped by it. Orion accepted her hand with grateful respect. At that very moment, the crystal crown rose gently from the marble pedestal without anyone touching it. Soft silver light surrounded Evelyn before the ancient crown settled gracefully upon her head. The entire shoreline brightened beneath the full moon as peaceful waves of light traveled across forests, rivers, valleys, and distant mountains. Throughout every kingdom, fading orchards blossomed with fresh fruit, crystal springs flowed with renewed clarity, fields became vibrant once again, and forgotten gardens awakened beneath the gentle moonlight. Joyful voices echoed through villages as families witnessed hope returning to the land. The first covenant slowly dissolved into shimmering silver light, its purpose finally fulfilled after generations of waiting. In the years that followed, Evelyn became the first Moonborn queen in centuries, not ruling above the kingdoms, but guiding them together through wisdom, compassion, and quiet service. The rulers continued leading their own people while gathering regularly beneath the Moonborn covenant to preserve peace instead of pursuing pride. Orion never reclaimed the title he had willingly surrendered. Instead, he devoted himself to rebuilding villages, restoring forests, and serving beside the very people he had once ruled from a distant throne. Respect gradually replaced regret because his actions spoke more clearly than any apology ever could. One peaceful evening, beneath another brilliant full moon, Evelyn and Orion stood beside the crystal lake where their paths had finally found harmony. Neither reached for a crown nor searched for destiny. They simply watched children laugh among blooming white lilies while the moon reflected across calm water.